Text 33. Shreyans dravyamayad yagnat gnana yagnah parantapa sarvam karma akhilam pardha gnane parisamapyate. So Krishna so far explained different kinds of yagnas, and he is classifying those yagnas as dravyamaya yagna and those are the ones which you sacrifice with your material possessions, dravya, and the ones you perform for gaining knowledge. So Krishna says, Shreya, what is better? Shreyat dravyamayat yagnaha. Better than the sacrifice of material possessions. Dravyamayat yagnat shreyaha. Better than that is gnana yagnaha, the sacrifice of knowledge. O Parantapa, O Arjuna, or O chastiser of the enemy. Sarvam karma akhilam pardha gnane parisamapyate. After all, the sacrifice of work culminates in transcendental knowledge. So Prabhupada says in the purport, the purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. So why we need knowledge? That is to gain release from material miseries. A person in ignorance commits sinful activities. If one is not educated, hey, you drive always on the right side, of course in US, and without knowledge, without the speed limit regulation, he drives and then gets caught and gets punished. So ignorance makes us commit mistakes. So knowledge helps us not commit mistakes or sinful activities, and thereby become freed from material miseries. That is why Krishna says, mode of goodness conditions us to happiness. Because by mode of goodness, we know what to do, how to work properly, just like a citizen who is knowledgeable about government regulations. There may be many tax implications of how to pay, how to show the gains of your business. But an intelligent person, he can find loophole within the tax regulation itself. And thereby he can offset it with some loss or show it in a different way. Thereby he won't pay taxes or much taxes. So knowledge helped him to overcome that misery. Of course, that kind of a knowledge conditions to material happiness. But this knowledge that Krishna is referring to is not just material happiness, but becoming freed from material miseries. Unless we become freed from material miseries, we cannot lovingly engage in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord. Of course, then one may say, then first let me acquire gnana and then engage in bhakti. So Bhagavatam says, you don't need to wait, even though Bhagavad Gita, it is prescribing for those who want to gradually elevate. That is also prescribed. For those who want to gradually elevate in a proper method in Varnashrama, which will take a long time, it may be suitable for previous ages. But there is a direct method also. By transcendental bhakti, gnana always comes. Vasudeve bhagavati bhakti yoga prayojitaha janayati asu vairagyam gnanam chayadahaitukam. By engaging in Vasudeve bhagavati bhakti yoga, transcendental loving service to Vasudeva, Krishna, Janayati, it generates Asu very soon. Vairagyam Gnanam. Not only Gnana, but Vairagya towards anything material. Sometimes the Gnanis, they may have knowledge, but they don't necessarily have Vairagya. Because the seed of enjoyment is still within their hearts. So if Gnana is compared to like a fire which burns the vegetation on the land, a Gnani can become freed from material miseries by the fire of knowledge, but the roots still remain. And when there is a proper atmosphere, proper rain, suitable atmosphere, those seeds sprout again. So Gnana without Vairagya is useless. But by Bhakti you get both Gnana and Vairagya. In Jagannath Puri, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyasa and went to Jagannath Puri, we know there is this great personality, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was a core Gnani. He was always engaged in mental speculation, reading Vedanta, but not so much in devotion. Even though he was engaged in devotion, it was with a impersonalistic view. Ultimately, God is impersonal. I need to merge into the impersonal. And he was preaching like that to even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he was elderly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was just 24 years at that time. He took sannyasa. Oh, you are a very young sannyasi. I need to educate you. And he tried to convert Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to an impersonalist Vedantist. For 7 days he tried to teach him from Vedanta, Sharirika Bhashya. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in turn, he transformed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya by presenting the beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the natural commentary of Vedanta Sutra, given by Vyasadeva himself. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he, looking at the devotional presentation, the powerful, pure devotional presentation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he agrees. And not only agrees, he comes to the realization that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord himself. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also exhibits his form, first as a four-armed Vishnu and then as a two-armed Krishna form with blackish complexion and playing flute. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya falls on his lotus feet and starts to offer him prayers. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, one day he comes and he starts to, before he comes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's house, he starts to offer prayers to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in front of his devotees. So while they were walking to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's house. So he composes 2 important slokas and he mentions it to the devotees. And the devotees, they come to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and in a palm leaf he writes and gives it to Jagadananda Pandit. So Jagadananda Pandit comes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give it, these 2 verses. But before it is given to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there's another devotee, Damodar Pandit, who copies it and writes it on a wall outside the room where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was staying in big letters. And then all the devotees they see this wall and then they start to recite and remember that shloka. Beautiful shloka, these 2 shlokas. And then Jagadananda Pandit goes inside and gives that palm leaf to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. See the beautiful writing of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the moment he sees, because that verse is glorifying the Lord as the Supreme Lord Himself. It's glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Supreme Lord Himself. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's avatar is, he came as a devotee of Krishna. So he didn't want anybody to glorify him as Krishna. And also to set an example for future who may have, where there may be a lot of imposters trying to act as the Supreme Lord. So he just tore it apart. So it was lost. But then by the time all the devotees would have already read that from the wall outside and they remembered in their hearts. And later in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami provides those two verses. And one verse is very, very important, as Srila Prabhupada quotes quite often in his lectures and books. So what it says is, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yogam Sikshardhamekah Purushah Purana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Shariradhari Krupam Buddhim Tam Aham Prapadye. So what it means is, this Krishna consciousness, this Bhakti Yogam, Nija Bhakti Yoga means the Bhakti unto himself, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who came as a devotee to teach Bhakti unto himself, who is none other than Purana Purusha, Krishna himself, who came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who taught this Bhakti Yoga. And this Bhakti Yoga is not different from Vairagya Vidya. It is knowledge, Vidya, but Vidya which also generates Vairagya. Sikshardham, in order to instruct us. Sikshardham Ekah Purusha Purana, that Purusha Purana, Krishna, he came as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Shariradhari. And who is Krupam Buddhim, the ocean of mercy. Yes, Tamaham Prapadye. I surrender unto that Supreme Lord. See, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was a Gnani, an impersonalist, a dry philosopher, see how he glorified Chaitanya Mahaprabhu after becoming a devotee. And he said, Bhakti generates Vairagya. Whereas Gnana, the Vairagya is only temporary. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, not only that, another day he comes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's house, where Mahaprabhu was staying, and he started to recite a shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam, but there is a twist. He changes one word inside Bhagavatam. Usually, scripture we should not change, because those are all words of the Lord and his powerful incarnations, like Vyasadeva. So you cannot change the scripture. That is why Bhagavad Gita is also called, the commentary of Prabhupada is also called Bhagavad Gita as it is. If you change the meaning or words, then it loses its power. But then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, even though after becoming a devotee, he is now changing that word. What is that? So there is this shloka in Bhagavatam. Tattenukampam susamikshamaano bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvagvapurbhir vidadhan namaste jivetayo mukti pade sadaya bhak. So what it basically means is, a devotee who undergoes all the tribulations, considering them to be his own past karma, because of his own past karma, and in fact Krishna has minimized those tribulations out of his kindness. So he goes through all of that, Tattenukampam, while earnestly waiting for the Lord's causeless mercy. Susamikshamaano Bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam. He goes through all those tribulations, considering them to be his own past misdoings. And Bhunjana evatma krutam vipakam Hrudvag Vapurbhir Vidadhan Namaste. He continues his devotional practices with his heart, with body, with mind, with words. And in this way, if somebody lives, Jiveta Saha Muktipade Sadaya Bhak. For him, liberation has become his rightful claim. What it means? Like, for example, in judicial system, let's say in Indian judicial system, a son naturally acquires the property of the father, isn't it? That's his rightful claim. Nobody can take that away from him. Naturally, he gets when the father passes away, when the father property gets passed on to the son. That is called Dayabhak. Dayabhak means rightful claim. So, just like that, see the powerful analogy. Just like that son gets the property of the father by right, nobody can take it away from him. Just like that, any devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness with his mind, body, and words, Mukti Pada or liberation becomes a rightful claim. Just like the property of the father comes to as a rightful claim to the son, liberation from material existence naturally is there for a devotee. So, why did Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya change that when he was reciting that sloka? He changed it. He said, instead of saying Jivetayo Muktipade Sadaya Bhak, he changed it saying Jivetayo Bhaktipade Sadaya Bhak. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, why did you change it Muktipada to Bhaktipada? He said, oh, this Mukti means aspired for by the Gnanis and impersonalists. They want impersonal effulgence, merge into impersonal effulgence, which is fearful, and the devotees hate it. They rather prefer to go to hell than go and merge into the effulgence, impersonal effulgence of the Lord where there is no activity. Isn't it? If you just go and merge into impersonal effulgence without any activity, it is Kaivalyam Narakayate. They would prefer to go to hell and preach where there is opportunity for activity in devotional service. So he said that mukti is nothing for a devotee. So bhakti is everything for a devotee. For a devotee, mukti is already there. For a devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness, the first result of bhakti is freedom from material miseries. One should note this. Krishna himself says, Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. If we truly, sincerely surrender to Krishna, the first thing Krishna does is Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. All our material miseries are vanquished. And one may say, why I am still suffering? Why I am still getting diseased? Why I am still having tribulations? Of course, for a sincere devotee, Krishna excuses all of that. But it does not mean that Krishna will not give you anything. Whatever is happening, Krishna is personally giving you that to make you more strong, more dependent, more learned, more progressed in devotional service. So whatever we are undergoing as a devotee is not because of our karma. The moment you surrender to Krishna through a bona fide spiritual master, agree to follow his instructions completely, then the karma does not act on such devotee. No material miseries. Krishna is personally protecting. Even though the miseries might come, they are all orchestration of Krishna to make us better in devotional service. You should have that faith. So for a devotee, he is always on the liberated platform. There is no material misery. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said it should have been Bhakti Pade. Why devotee aspires Mukti? And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu corrects him. And he says, when it is said Mukti Pada, it has a different meaning in Bhagavatam. See, in Bhagavatam, every word has so many meanings and we have to understand it from the right bona fide personality. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains, Mukti Pada means the Lord's lotus feet, the pada, under which all kinds of muktis exist, or the Lord is the grantor of all kinds of muktis, even to impersonalists. So a devotee gets the shelter of the Lord, who is called Mukti Pada. So it is a right use of the word. So he said we should not change scriptures. So like that, you see how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, once who was a Gnani, such an elevated Gnani, once he became a devotee, he was relishing devotional service so much with Gnana and Vairagya. So that's what Prabhupada says here, that one should further engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord. That is the purpose of knowledge. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, when one, nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice. And one should know this mystery. Sometimes sacrifices sometimes takes different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. So there was one video sent, very funny video, where this father was teaching this boy, small boy, and he was asking the boy to hit this football. He was teaching him, he was a very small boy, he was teaching him football and how to kick. And this boy was not kicking properly. He was either missing the ball or he was hitting in one edge. And so it was being done improperly. So the father came and held his knees, basically the foot, the shin and the knees of the boy, and he forcibly made that boy hit the ball. And then he hit the ball on the center and the ball went a long distance and the boy became very happy. And the father said, now you repeat it. And the boy came and he started to hold his knees with his hands, and he was pushing the ball or the legs with his hands and then hit the ball. And then the father was laughing. See, what the attempt he made is correct. Ultimately, he hit the ball, isn't it? But he was lacking in knowledge. The idea of the father was that you hit the ball in the center, so he helped the boy to hold the feet steady so he can hit in the center. But the boy literally took it without knowledge that he has to hold with his hands and then hit the ball. So that's what Prabhupada says here. If one does sacrifices with knowledge, understanding the purpose, why my father said like this, the purpose is to hit the ball in the center, not to hold the legs with my hands. The purpose is to hit the ball in the center. So similarly, the purpose of sacrifice is to please the Lord, to gain transcendental knowledge about the Lord. That is why when Prabhupada says in the purport, when one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, The performer of sacrifice should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. That Krishna mentions in 7th chapter as well. Bahunam janmanam ante gnanavan mam prapadyate. So real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness. So I'll stop here. Anyone has any questions or comments? Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.